Good morning. I'm George Brown, the Executive Director of the Highlights Foundation. This has been an incredible run, Sarah, since mid-March when you said, I'd love to do something. Let's host some free webinars and do some chats. And I think it's great that we're able to do another chat today with Jennifer Jacobson. We will be taking a little break over the next couple of weeks while Sarah hosts the online class for getting to know your novel and then starts getting to know your character, as well as the planning for the whole novel workshop. But we will be back and we'll certainly keep you apprised of that.
Don't
Allison,
worry.
So good morning, and Allison, will you introduce our guests?
Boy, I'd love to do that this morning. Welcome to our Highlights Foundation Gather. We're grateful to have Sarah Aronson and Jennifer Jacobson with us today. We will take time to listen to Jen and Sarah in conversation. Then you can ask questions of our writers using the Q&A feature. If you've joined us each week since mid-March, as George said, you know that Sarah Aronson writes everything from picture books to novels. She is a gifted teacher and an enthusiastic supporter of storytellers. Sarah, thank you as always for your support and for being our Highlights Foundation Gather host. Jennifer Jacobson is the author of books for children, teens, and educators. She is a former classroom teacher, and she loves looking at writing from all sides: reader, writer, mentor, and teacher. This fall, Jen will release her new series, Twig and Turtle, which follows a family as they simplify and move into a tiny house. We can't wait to follow the adventures of these two sisters, both big and tiny. Thank you both so much for being here this morning. Let's get started.
Thanks, Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, Sarah.
It's so nice to see you.
Always a great day when we get to be together.
I'm going to try not to cry today. If this is your first HF Gather, let me tell everyone, we talk about three things that start with C. We always talk about creativity and how we can bolster our creativity. We talk about curiosity, which I think is the engine of creativity. And we talk about the foundation of everything we do, community. But because Jennifer and I are whole novel facilitators, you know I don't use the M word, I also want to talk about craft, and I want to talk about character, and I want to talk about change. So lots of letters, lots of words that start with C. So let's start, Jen, with the question I ask everyone. This is week 11 of stay at home. I honestly cannot believe it. How are you keeping the flame lit? And are you finding new ways of being creative and curious?
I am. I think this is a time, obviously it's a time of disruption. And I really believe that disruption is good for art. And so I have some days that are better than others. There are times when my mind gets full of fear with what's going on in the world. And I have a little harder time centering myself, but mostly I welcome the disruption. Mostly I think it's going to be a good thing. I trust that. I trust that changing things up is good for writing. I also have really begun to think of my time as less linear, which is really easy to do during this pandemic time because who knows what day it is. So I'm not thinking about time as linearly as I used to, nor am I as maybe productivity oriented. So the way that manifests in my life is that I'm doing something that Twyla Tharp introduced to me, which is reading fat. So as I maybe perhaps start to research one part of my novel, I'll come across an article that's totally unexpected. That'll introduce me to a new idea I've never heard of. And I'm allowing myself to follow trails wherever they may take me with a little more trust that it's all going to come together for me, that it's all for a reason. I'm not sort of beating myself up, telling myself to stop distracting myself, get back to work. I'm embracing the distractions.
I love that. In our house, we don't call it the Twyla Tharp method. We call it the Rube Goldberg way. You just follow it wherever it goes, and it takes you someplace new that you haven't been before or didn't expect to be. And I am finding that same thing, that freedom to say, well, I don't have to do all these other things that normally I do. So now I can follow the breadcrumbs, which is sort of what I thought writing was going to be like when I started it.
Yes.
I also, I thought that was the life. I also think that this, like what you just said, disruption is good for art. So I would have said before pandemic, I'm a morning writer only, and full stop. And now I'm not. Now I've been able to regroup. So I do a little writing in the morning, and then I've been doing, shout out to Jandy Nelson, who runs a magic hour from 2 to 3 Central Time, 12 o'clock her time. And that little bit of community, suddenly that's become a really productive hour for me. Who would have thought it? Not I, until that disruption happened. So disruption is something that both of us sort of, I'm going to say we might be experts on, because we all write in different genres. I want to hear a lot about Turtle and Twig, because disruption and simplification are not always on the same place, but also just the variety of kinds of things you've written. How does that process work for you?
Okay, so I have been given the advice since the beginning of time to choose one genre, one age group, and stick with it. That whole idea of, get an identity in your writing life, brand yourself. Yeah, no. I am totally incapable of doing that. I just am. That's, I wouldn't be the person I am if I did that. And what I'm discovering is that really story dictates the genre, what it is I want to say. Sometimes what I want to say is a picture book, and sometimes what I want to say is a middle grade novel, and I don't always get that right the first time. Sometimes I have to be told, no, this isn't really, this has happened a couple times, where I thought I wrote a picture book and somebody said, no, really, this is a chapter book. You've got a chapter book series here. So that happens. But what I've come to trust in the long run is cross-pollination. So these ways of writing get me to look at things differently, and then each age group, mostly I write realistic fiction. The only fantasy I write is picture books. But for example, I've been writing middle grade fiction that's realistic, and I think people would categorize it as fiction that grapples with difficult issues in children's lives. That's sort of the path that I've been on for a while. Well, I returned now with Twig and Turtle this is Twig and Turtle. Although this arc isn't the actual cover, because now we have a big Great Dane named Bo on the cover. But I know, I'm excited. With Twig and Turtle, I had written a series similarly, really, well, that's a word I can't say, really early in my career, the Winnie books. And they were about 3 friends, and it was a chapter book series in a similar vein. And I wrote one way earlier in my career. Now that I've written these other middle grade novels, what I'm discovering is that the chapter book for me is not as limited a genre as I had, or age group, as I had thought earlier in my career. For example, the issues that my girls are dealing with, yes, Twig and Turtle are moving to a tiny house, and yes, the series is full of humor and hope, creativity, but I also am tackling girl issues. I'm tackling issues of gender. I'm tackling issues of girls speaking up when they need to speak up, or what do you do when there's a lack of privacy? So I'm finding that the ways that I stretched muscles with my middle grade work is really informing this chapter book series this time around. I feel like I'm very different and the books are different. So that's a quick answer.
I mean, I think that word count and making the reader feel something are not like you don't feel less because the words are less or because the story is more focused. And that the wonderful thing about writing a series that I miss about My Fairy Godmothers is that you get to follow the character, that the characters have legs, that they change over time, and that new rubs get to go under the microscope.
Yes.
Which is really nice. And then you can take that to the other kinds of fiction. I also find that in these younger books, maybe ironically, grown-ups have a role to play. Like that there are adults in chapter books that aren't always allowed in middle grade and YA novels. And I love that because grown-ups are a big source of tension, at least in my world.
Absolutely, I agree.
So
I'm fun to play with.
And I'm so excited that you have a tiny house.
I didn't realize this until this series, but I always write about home. And how could I have not known that? But all of my middle grade, paper things, my characters are homeless. The dollar kids, they buy a home for $1. I've been writing about home my whole career, and it's really like suddenly I've got this aha going on. But I'm when I was a kid, my favorite place to play was in my neighbor's VW camper. And it was one of those campers that had the little sink and it had the pop-up tent and the little beds. And I could play in that camper for hours, and they were very generous in allowing me to do so. But I'm back with Twig and Turtle playing in my camper.
That's amazing. Place and our memories are so important to our fiction. And when I think about how I get into a story, it's almost always through the setting, through the character reveals itself when I can see them in the place where they feel safe and not safe. Where they make mistakes. That place where, I did it again, I messed up.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point, Sarah. That makes me right now want to write down, where does Twig not feel safe? And why? That is such a good question to ask about our characters. I love that.
Thank you.
We have to rewatch us. I get it.
I know. So we're about to have conversations like this at the whole novel. To me, the whole novel retreat is all about reimagination and revision. So if you want to use Twig and Turtle as an example, you can, or one of your other novels. What is revision in your home, in your place?
I can really speak to that right now. I just got line edits back from my newest middle grade. It's called Crashing in Love. And I kid you not, I love the fact that I have the most thorough editor on the planet, because that's really what you want. You want someone examining everything at the sentence level. And what does this mean? But the problem with track changes is that you can see the data. So I can see that I have over 900 comments that I have to address. And every one of those comments totally takes me out of my centered place. It just puts me in fight or flight, because they feel like little challenges, and I have to question every single one. I've come to understand that even though I can't control my nervous system when I'm doing it, I can continue to love that I get this opportunity, because it's how we grow. It pushes us into being better writers. It pushes us into creating the art that we really want to create. It's hard. And the thing that I also, in whole novel and in my life, I read for other writers. I critique work. And the one thing that I'm telling other writers the most often, and it's obviously then advice for myself, it's you spot it, you got it, is that often there are places that we don't, and Tim Leach, the writer Tim Leach said this before me, there are places in our writing where often we don't fully commit. There are places where we don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
There are scenes that we should write that we don't want to write. There are characters developed that we're too afraid to develop. And so while I'm revising, I'm very much aware that I do that. And I'm looking for those places where I haven't fully committed, and I make myself get in there.
I ask my protagonist to ask me, where have you let me off the hook?
Ooh, that's another good gem.
Yeah, so I think I learned that from you probably. So that or Nancy, that when like I want to hear where my writer thinks, oh good, you didn't make me do that. That was really nice of you, Sarah. And those are the scenes I have to go back to. I think that, that's why we are people who revisit themes, is because we're going deeper into those themes. I happen to think my books are all about forgiveness, self and others, that I can't seem to get away from
that's
that.
lovely.
Yeah, I also think it's what the world needs. But that those are things, those are moments when I don't make my character face up to what she has done, when I don't put her on the pedestal and make her make that speech. Those are the things that I have to start doing in the revision. And I don't discover that, and I don't think any of us discover that only through track changes. I think that when we're doing that is when we step away from the words and we say, what did I actually want to say?
Yeah.
Because
right.
Those, it's so hard to do that work on a linear, on a small level. We really need to step back and do that global thing and say, oh, am I even writing the right story? That's what happened to me. Yes. That happens to me at least once per novel. It's like, oh, I'm just avoiding my novel.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing. Sometimes writing feels like therapy. Yes. All right.
It feels like therapy.
So you also do a lot of work to support teachers. And right now in our changing world, we're all looking for ways to support teachers. Recently, Kate Messner gave a great webinar on turning your presentations to virtual. Do you have any recommendations for people who are trying to work with teachers and young writers and readers?
Sure. I think that the children's community did an amazing job when we first learned that schools were closing and that families were going to be, kids were going to be home and parents were going to be co-teachers, that we immediately activated and we looked for ways to help, and we provided books and we provided on content, and we got permission for teachers to read our books, and we read our own work. And I think all of that was and is really wonderful. But I also want to remind us all, and me included, that we need to ask teachers what they need. Like, they've been doing this now for several months. It's hard. It's really hard. And it's hard for parents. And I think it's time for us to step back a little bit and say, what can I do for you? How can I help? How can I support what you're doing? My son is a middle grade principal. out in Denver. And I asked him about this. Are you using all of the content that authors are creating? And he actually told me that his teachers are being inundated with content, that they're not only are authors providing content, and this was not a criticism by any stretch of the imagination, but not only are authors providing content, but curriculum companies are making all of their content free for teachers at this time. So he was saying that his teachers are getting access to all kinds of sites that a few months from now they're going to be asking pay for, but that there's a lot of content out there. I think what is harder for teachers is keeping a sense of community. And so is there a way that we can help them create community? And we can do that in saying to teachers, hey, I would love to work with a classroom and support your writers in the next few months. Or we can offer, so here's something that I believe. The teaching that I've been doing with teachers all these years is teaching Writers Workshop. And Writers Workshops has 4 main components. And one of those main components is author's chair. It's really important that student authors have an audience. And that's hard for teachers to do in the classroom. The time is extremely limited. And, allowing time for kids to read their work to each other is tough. But how ideal now that everybody's home. And can I be a listener? Yes. And do I understand that kids learn to write by being told what they're doing well? Yes. Can I tell each kid who reads to me what he or she did that's working and that's what other writers do? Yes. So maybe offering our expertise in that way that helps teachers grow community, grow writers, instead of just creating, like, as I said, more curriculum. Yeah. And not that it's not wonderful. I think that's a part of it too.
I mean, I think I have lots to say. I love asking for what people need because it's overwhelming to just look at the vast array, even the content being given for writers is vastly overwhelming. And that how do we choose and how do we find the people who will hear us, correct, the way we want to be heard. So I love that. And I also love that you mentioned just the good stuff. And I think that is so great for kids to hear, is for young writers to hear what they're doing well and to get out of that paradigm of thinking that the real stuff is the critique, the bad stuff. There is no bad stuff, first of all, but that the good stuff, knowing what you do well, knowing where you've made me feel something, is so important to learning how to be a good writer. And I think in our rush to get to the end of every project, we forget that on every level, not just for kids, also for grown-ups.
I agree.
Yeah. So can you're such a great teacher. Can we give these writers and teachers and readers and illustrators just like 1 or 2 or 3 tips that you can offer in terms of revision or the writing process in general? Your favorite tips.
Okay. So, right, here are my most popular for the classroom, but they will work virtually as well. One, and I think this is happening during this time, and it's one of the upsides, and that is that I'm a believer that children should be given, that everybody should be given choice in what they write. That sure, it's great, we need to teach genres, we need to teach persuasive writing, we need to teach narrative writing. Everyone can be working in the same genre, but there's no reason to provide the topic. The learning to find ideas in the world, learning to come up with your own topics, learning, writing about things that you care about, that you're passionate about, that's part of the writing process. And I think that's something that we can do during this time to great success. The another tip, this is my most popular tip that works in the classroom, but I think it would work at home too. And that is for the first 5 minutes that you are writing, if you're a parent listening to this and you've got kids writing at home, my recommendation is to write with them. Partner writing is so powerful. And if you put on music for the first 5 or 10 minutes that have no lyrics, that's really just meant to be background music, and you start with that music, and that's your quiet time. And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, you can turn the music off if you want and keep on writing. That music will train your brain to get into the writerly place. So it's a trigger. It's a ritual. And teachers who try this just can't get over how effective it is. It settles us. When our brain hears that same familiar music, it settles us down immediately. It says, oh, we're writing it. It goes right to that creative, generative place. So there's another tip. And getting back to conferencing with students, giving feedback. The first 2 steps that I recommend when conferring with students that anybody can do is, 1, just mirror back what they wrote. Just hearing our words mirrored is incredibly powerful. Oh, you wrote a story about the time we went camping and we couldn't put the camp stakes in because the ground was too hard and the tent kept blowing over. Just reflecting it back is such a powerful gift to a writer. And then going on to tell them everything they did that you loved. That's really how writers are grown. It's sort of the compost for plants. It's the compost for writers.
I think there is nothing more empowering than when you know you've been read.
Yes.
It
and
is
heard.
And heard. And then when a teacher will say to me, Sarah, you wrote that, and they mirror back to me, what they're saying is, I see you. You are a writer. You have a story, and I have heard it. And no, I don't care how old you are. What is more powerful than knowing that you have been heard? There was a question from Lisa. Do you suggest the same music for that ritual or different music?
The same, maybe 2 or 3. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that will drive me batty. But in truth, you hardly even hear it. And I stumbled upon this tip accidentally way back in my early writing days. My then husband was taking drumming, and he had a drumming tape. And I have no idea, but I popped it in. I was in my office, and I popped it in. We're talking a tape, so it was a long time ago. And I started writing to this drumming, and I found it really helpful that it kind of got my brain in a great place. So then I started doing it pretty ritualistically, putting that tape in, and did it work? Well, I traveled a lot during that time, and I would be in hotel rooms and wouldn't carry my tape with me or the tape recorder. And as soon as I would start to write, I would hear the drumming in my mind. The 2 were married so closely that I heard that drumming for years, long after I no longer had the tape or the tape recorder. Now, and since then I've done it very deliberately, and it just is this way of getting us in. I don't think to myself, is there another piece of cake in the refrigerator? Or I should do a little laundry, or I just go in deep. And the same thing happens with kids.
Yeah, I think that this is sort of like the morning pages.
Yes.
When I get out of bed, I open my notebook, I start writing. I call it my curiosity journal. And I talk to kids about this too, that I don't judge myself. I just know it's morning. I open up the notebook and it's time to write something. It doesn't matter what it is. What I love about the music idea is that it's like, when I pull up to highlights and see the barn and see the cabins, I know that this is I am a writer, and this is where I go, and that inspiration is going to find me here. So I think that that's what those rituals are all about, is reminding you that you can do it, reminding you where you are, and that you can, you're right back there. It's a quicker portal to creativity.
You're reminding me of my pandemic portal. I have to share what I've been doing recently, and I don't know if this is so quirky that it will only apply to me, but anyone who's been to highlights or a writing retreat of any kind knows that so much of the pleasure goes in the anticipation. You pack your bags, and you don't just pack the clothes you love. You pack the books you love, and your journals, and your colored pencils, and your index cards. You're anticipating this wonderful, expansive time of just being creative, and then that's exactly what you get. You arrive at highlights, and that's how it feels. You're like, yeah, well. In my own home, I'm trying to treat my home during this time as a retreat center. And the way that I create this feeling over and over and over is when I start getting off that sort of in the now zone, that presence, that creative time, I say, oh, I've just arrived. And that's been my mantra. Oh, I've just arrived. And sometimes I think, man, the prior habitant really was messy. But I just over and over again tell myself I am at the threshold today of that creative experience. I've just arrived.
That's amazing. Now that it's warmer, I can go to the porch. And that has been my portal, is that I put on a t-shirt and some pants or shorts now, switch to shorts. And I go out to the porch, and the porch is like my little cocoon. And it's where I've had really good ideas in the past. And I just sit down on my couch. I know I can hear I have a church across the street from me, and the organist always is playing music about when I get there. And it is,
perfect.
And sometimes he plays, he or she, I don't know. I've never ventured inside. Every once in a while, she or he will play a Beatles tune. And then it'll stop. The music will stop. And I imagine the minister saying to the organist, "Don't play that Beatles music." And then the liturgical music continues. And I have this ongoing imagination that is happening. And something is always inspired by those moments. So it is now time for our lightning round, where I'm going to ask you some quick and silly questions, a la Andy Cohen, my little inspiration for all of this. And you just off the top of your head, pencil, pen, or straight to the keyboard?
Lately, pen.
Pen. Any kind of pen?
Yeah, these Uniball pens that feel so good in my hand, and they just flow so well, and they're smudge resistant.
There is nothing worse than a pen that stops working in the middle of a good idea. I'm going to say that is like the villain of, the villain of some book I'm going to write today. New York pizza or Chicago pizza? Thin or thick?
I am so sorry, because I've spent no time in New York or Chicago eating pizza. I would have to say my own homemade.
That's excellent. As living in Chicago, I used to ask that question because I miss New York pizza. Scrivener or note cards?
Scrivener.
Oh, interesting. When you can go out, are you a library person or a coffee shop person?
Coffee shop.
What's the first book you ever loved?
Charlotte's Web.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Still my favorite.
It's so good. It's so good. I was looking at the annotated version the other day, and I thought, why am I ruining this? I'm just going to go read it.
Oh, I have it too.
Hiking or biking, or forget it, stay at home and chill?
Hiking. Love hiking.
Yeah, I really miss being able to go to the top of a mountain. That is one of the things.
I'm a chicken on a bike. I wish I were a biker, but I'm too afraid.
Well, that's where the flat is easier, is that when you're in a flat place, you don't have to worry about going downhill really fast. Are you an effort person? So you're an effort person, or are you a momentum person?
I don't even know what that means.
Like, do you enjoy the effort, or do you enjoy or the speeding down really fast?
What I love exercise that causes me to lose myself. So I want to be on a mountain path or swimming, but I want to lose me.
That is not where I knew I was going, but I love it. I love it. Let's take some questions from the audience. Do you choose names for your characters because of their meaning? Like, how do you choose names for your characters?
I struggle with this. I use a baby name site in the beginning. I look through names. I come at it in the beginning very logically, like Twig and Turtle is a very not good example, but I'll often try to figure out popular names that were of the kids of the age that, just things like that. They never stick. And while I'm writing, the names change. And eventually, by the time I finished a draft, I have the name I love. But it's a long process. But the difficulty of that is school visits are hard because someone will mention Sylvie, and I'll think, Sylvie, because I've changed the names of the characters so often, my minor characters sometimes get lost in my head.
Yeah. We have a new baby in our family, so I'll give everybody a name. Is Emmett, is my stepson, and his wife had a new baby, and 8 pounds 4 ounces. It's beautiful. I can't wait to see him.
I'm going to have a new baby in my family in November.
Ooh.
I know, I'm going to be grandma.
Are you going to be grandma, or are you going to be Nana?
I'm going to be, I think, it'll change. By the time the baby's born, it'll change 5 times. But I think right now it's Graham. Just Graham.
Yeah, I love Graham. I'm trying to be Bubby, but I'm going to be honest. They are not taking to the Bubby. And so it's not coming naturally. And I don't want to be I don't know, who cares? Whatever they call me is fine on some level. But I was hoping for Bubby, but it's not sticking yet. The time will tell.
Yeah.
Time will tell. Yeah. When you see that there are a lot of edits on your manuscript, do you read them all before you begin rewriting, or do you work through the edits beginning to end?
It would be so much smarter if I read them all. I also fear that it would flatten me. So I start from the beginning and I read one after another. Every now and then I'll put a TK in the document, meaning I have to return to it to come, just because I feel like I have to read on before I can make a decision. But I do step by step by step.
I will say that I have learned to train myself to go to my favorite scenes first. So I go to the important scenes, the ones that are important to me, and I just take a peek and see how my editor is feeling about the important scenes, and then go through it linearly, because those plots.
I so needed today.
Thank you. Those plot turns that are the emotional, that are the parts that make me feel, are the ones I don't want to lose the strength behind. So if they're saying something there, that really sets me up. Also, usually when you're at the line edit stage, you've already gone through the big stuff. You've settled on the stuff. A lot of times it's I love the copy edit stage because I don't know how to use a comma. So I'm like, yeah, accept them all. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. Go ahead, change the punctuation. What do I know?
Exactly. Copy edits are great. Clean me.
Right. A question from Sheila Lewis. Thanks, Jennifer and Sarah. This has been so important. I know teachers are inundated and kids are sick of online learning. We know it. How about more imaginative, open-end story creation? As you said, mirrored storytelling. Can we set them up and get them off screen a bit of the time? Teachers need to free up and get to their own creativity and expertise. Sheila is from the Knowledge Project, everybody. And I could not agree with you more. When I am done with my next revision, I am socially distancing myself from my laptop.
Mhm.
So great, so important.
I agree with everything.
How much time do you recommend for young graders, second grade, daily in a classroom setting, Jennifer?
How much time reading or writing?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
I'm
Reading.
going to say writing because it says for young writers.
Yeah. Well, as a first grade teacher, I had a 40-minute, well, actually, if you include author's chair, I had a 50-minute block. It's hard to do all of the components of Writer's Workshop without a 50-minute block. You're giving a mini lesson. The kids are reporting to you as they go off to write. They tell you what they're writing and what their topic is, and you say, oh, okay, off you go. And then they have their writing time where you're conferring, and then there's author's chair. So about 50 minutes. And at second grade, I would definitely want 50 minutes. That's the ideal in the ideal world, I know, and not every classroom gets that.
But you're the one who taught me 9 lines. So like if you have a student who is not having a good time writing, like I would have been, tell them to write 9 lines. Or as Kathy Appelt would say, once told me also, how about 5 minutes, Sarah? And that when you make it quick, the resistance to it goes down, and we're able, and your students and you will be able to find more. I have been
right,
and how much I've been able to do with the 9-line method.
True, and you've got to remember that all of those components are carrots. So when a child, you put on the music and their brains go in, so most kids will enter pretty quickly that way. But you've got the carrot of talking to the teacher, conferring with her about your writing, and when you do that, you get a love bomb. You get to hear everything you're doing well. And then you also get the carrot of reading to your classmates and having all hands go up to respond to your work. So that workshop model has a lot of carrots to keep kids going.
I also want to be an advocate for privacy. Sometimes, sometimes we don't want to share, and sometimes the permission to not share ahead of time allows people who are writers of all ages to enter that creative portal without fear. So like sometimes this is what my journal
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to add, and I'll show you if I can pull one up quick. I'm not sure I can, because I don't have the right journal in front of me, but yeah, I can. So sometimes writing is also drawing. Right. And I believe in drawing for all ages. I often, when you ask pencil or pen, what I'm doing with my pen often is drawing a scene before I write it.
All right, everyone who's listening today, if you would draw anything and post it to Twitter, and we'll just do a hashtag HFGatherThanks. I would love to see lots of pictures and see how the drawing helps your creativity, helps you get into that portal. For me, that has been the number one thing I have learned in the last year, is that it's not about being good. It's just about putting the pencil to the paper and doodling. And once I'm there, then my brain is swirling. And once the brain is swirling, something's going to pop out. And it doesn't have to be good. Kathy Lentes, hi, Kathy, says, do you write about kids with particular problems, such as homelessness, based on your experiences with children in the classroom, or is this another inspiration? Where do you get your ideas?
Certainly, the kids that I've worked with reinforce my ideas, I should say. But mostly, I'm mining my own childhood. Now, granted, I was not homeless as a child, but I had experiences that led me to wanting to write about a homeless child. So I would say that most of my topics come from most of my ideas come from a very personal place. And then I look to the world, the children that I'm working with, the research that I do, the homeless shelter, to inform and enrich the book. But it comes from a feeling first.
What's your revision approach when you realize a manuscript has a dip in tension and needs a twist? What tips do you have for creating new plot twists?
Oh, I'm going
I know what I do.
Well, Sarah, go ahead, and then they'll give me a little time to think.
I delete the whole section and reimagine it. So I start to think, what if and why not? And I remind myself what the character wants, and I remind myself what the character thinks they cannot have. And then I'll ask myself, what does this character think they're never going to do? And then I write it on a separate piece of paper and, see what happens.
Yeah.
But I think making space for yourself when we're always trying to edit what we already have, if it's not working, it's not working. Get rid of it.
I often think too that that it's a sign. So I love Story Genius, Lisa Krone's stories, and she not only looks at what a character wants, but the character's misbelief, and that combination of I believe I want something, but I continually do not get what I want because I've got this other misbelief that's getting in my way. She calls that the third rail. And you've got tension in a novel as long as you're on the third rail. If you're in a place in your novel where there isn't tension, it may not be a twist you need. It may not be a reveal. It may not be an unexpected character. It may be that you've gone too far off the third rail. And that's personally what I would do, is examine my character's misbelief again. Am I putting my character in a place that challenges them? Am I making things really hard on them?
Remember that a draft is about discovery. And so that once you've discovered one level, then you have to go deeper. If you get married to the words that were part of your discovery, you're going to be stuck there. You're going to have to be intentional and think outside instead of feeling and getting back to that third rail. That third rail, that emotional component, that journey that it's not linear. That's what we're talking about with Get to Know Your Character. Is essentially all of this, is that how do we get to know that character better so that we know what is going to be hard for that character to do and how that character sees the world. Don't put your discovery draft is an important part of the process, but keep imagining from there. Linda Marshall asks, when storyboarding, how many chapters do you do at once? For me, storyboarding, Linda, is like homework. I recently asked her to try it. How to make it more palatable or less fattening.
I don't storyboard in the maybe there's a revision technique. After you've written your novel, you go back and you storyboard it, and it can show you where you have emotion, where you don't have emotion, where there is an action, where you've overprotected your characters. I do it a little differently, and sometimes I do that, but I draw several scenes until I feel like I've got something to work with, and then I write. And then I sort of feel like, okay, I need to sort of, it's like that driving. You can only see as far as the headlights, the doctoral quote. I do that with drawing. So then I draw a little further, and then I write that way. So my storyboarding is a little less traditional.
I also think, we are talking about going outside the box. How about let's break the box? And let's just say, whatever works for you, if it feels like fun and it helps you discover, do it. And if it doesn't work for you that day, if it feels like homework, do something else.
And the other thing, in writing picture books, I resisted storyboarding picture books for years. Who knows why? How silly. But now I storyboard every picture book. It makes such a huge difference.
I often confess that the first lecture I gave on storyboarding was that I knew Carolyn Coleman taught me how to storyboard.
Mm.
And I knew it sounded like really good advice, but I didn't do it. And then I was lecturing about it, and I literally started doing it. I was like my head was going to explode. Like, why haven't I been doing this already?
Exactly.
And when it's hard, I mark the places where it's hard, because usually that's where I'm going. I have gotten away either from the emotional journey, or I don't know the answer. And, you know, it just is, I have to get back to the hard work of answering those questions. And it's hard, people. It's not easy. That's why it's so much better when you do it together. All right, we are at 9:52. I am going to take one more question. You mentioned taking your book or character to places that you might be scared to go. How do you feel about racial issues in children's books? I'm working on a book and I want to talk about racial issues, but I'm scared if it's too much. I think that racial issues right now is, you know, like, is the conversation we're all having. And I would love to, like, I mean, I think we could talk about this for an hour. I think that we need to think about characters first and why they're in the story.
Yeah. And, you know, all of us live in a world that has racial tensions, and kids hear about things that happen in the world. So, you know, I think no conversation is taboo. No topic is taboo. You tell it through, you know, Jack was my character in Smallest Elephant, was abandoned in a campground. His mother was bipolar. I never use the word bipolar. Jack describes it as his mom's spinning times. So I think that no topic is too much or too heavy. What is important is that if you're writing about racial tensions and you then you have to write it from your own understanding and lack of understanding. It has to be truthful. It has to be yours. It can't be something out here that you're thinking about. It has to be your own experience. So for example, if I were to write about racial tensions, and I do to a little bit with Dollar Kids, I get into class tensions, not racial tensions, but class tensions. I would then have to face my own white privilege. I would have to face my own biases. I would have to face my own lack of knowledge. I would have to face my own different experiences. You can't go somewhere halfway. You've got to go deep.
That's right. The last two questions are about struggling, and we'll go a little over. What is a good tip for students who are struggling with setting, or about staying consistent, not overcomplicating and convoluting the story? How do we avoid that struggle, basically, and stay on task?
We all have our areas where we feel strongest. And I have adult writers in my writers group who love setting and have to be reminded that even too much setting can also be too much of a good thing. So, like anything, I think we need to ask, I often do work around William Sloane's density, and he says that every sentence needs to do two jobs. But if you look at sentences, what's the job of this sentence? Okay, what's the job of this sentence? Has this sentence done the same thing that that sentence did? Do we need that sentence? You know, it doesn't take much to activate the reader's imagination around settings. So a few choice details are brilliant. Too much details is laden description. I think.
Yeah, I think too that sometimes we get to intention a little bit too quickly, and that when we're trying to make our point before we have fleshed out all the characters, before we're done playing, that sometimes we can get convoluted or we can get stuck on things, and that that those are like, let's all try to have a little bit more fun with this process when we can. And instead of always thinking, let's not think all the time. Let's try and play a little bit more and see what we come up with, either away from the manuscript or in the context of the book.
And can I add that many, many, many writers are process is to overwrite and cut.
Right.
And so that's a fine, valid process, especially with kids. We can't think that that first draft has to be perfect. We should know that that's a ball of clay. That it's something to mold. It can be molded and flattened and molded and flattened. And so overwriting is many writers' process, and then they rein it in.
Writing, what I think why I love writing so much is that there is no prescription. So there's permission. So we all, let's all today, permission to be creative, permission to underwrite, to overwrite, to storyboard only a little bit, to delete, to not delete, to look, to make things hard. We all have permission for everything. The process meanders. And so because the process meanders, it never looks the same, even in the career of the same writer, which I can attest
Right.
to.
Changes book to book.
Right. So is there anything you're reading right now as we bring George and Allison back? Anything you're reading that you absolutely love?
Let's see. So if you haven't read this yet, it's so much fun. This is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. And she is one of my favorite adult writers. But this is a book about a writer in her 20s trying to achieve her dreams. And it's layered with the writing life and the difficulties of writing, the difficulties of getting it on a page. And I just loved every second of reading it, and now I'm going to reread it.
I want to boost my friend Georgina Marie's book, Improv for Writers. If you are having a hard time having fun, it's all sorts of fun exercise written by an actress who does improv and who is a voice of many audiobooks. So really tons of fun.
How could we have a hard time having fun when it's hanging out with the two of you?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah and Jennifer. This has been great. Thanks, everybody, for being a part of this session with us. This has been a wonderful series to be having. We look forward to having another one in June. We'll be in touch for sure. At the same time, we're starting to think about what our campus looks like this summer and how we might reopen the small groups for unworkshop. So that's our next challenge to dig into and see what happens. Thanks, everybody. It's been great. Have a great
Thank you
afternoon.
both.
Thank you all so much. Thank you
Bye.
for sticking with me.